budget, of course, dropped last night. Treasurer Jim Chalmers launched the pre-election financial report with a tiny tax cut and a huge deficit. Labor has offered all taxpayers basically $5 a week in their pocket in 2026 and a further $5 the following year. There's a couple of other things in there as well. In his budget speech to Parliament, Dr. Chalmers described the tax cuts as modest but meaningful to separate the facts from the spin, winners and losers, all that sort of thing. The unconventional economist, Leith Van Onselen. Hello, mate. You've no doubt been busy chatting, I would imagine, over the last 24 hours.
Yeah, that's right, Bill. Yeah, thanks for having me on again. Yeah, I must admit I'm a little bit tired. Whenever the federal budget comes out every year, it tends to be sort of fairly late night the night before. So you always feel a little bit groggy the next day. But anyway, we'll soldier on.
All right. Well, let's start. You'll be nice and rehearsed and well oiled in what's going on here. Then let's start with the surprise tax cuts. Am I being too cynical to believe the upcoming election is the reason for these cuts?
Oh, 100%, mate. This is a throw money at the wall and see what sticks sort of budget. So effectively, all the polling that has taken place in the last 6 months to a year has basically identified cost of living as the biggest concern of voters, and this budget is basically Labor's way of saying, look, we've heard you on cost of living, and here's what we're going to do about it. So they've effectively, fire hosed a bunch of stuff to alleviate the cost of living crisis. So obviously the biggest one, and the tax cuts were a big surprise. Nobody sort of saw that coming. I certainly didn't. And they are sort of targeted. Everyone gets a tax cut, but it's targeted at the sort of lower to middle income end. So the lowest tax threshold's been lowered, or will be lowered, from 16% to 14% over 2 years. It'll cost about $17 billion over the forward estimates, and it'll give us a small tax cut. And the other area which they're obviously trying to throw money at is the energy rebates, which you already knew were there. They were well flagged. Obviously, giving 20% off people with student debts. So we already knew that was there. But the other big one is that they're going to spend about $9 billion on Medicare, the PBS, things like that. So it is very much a cost of living budget. That's its aim. It's designed purely for re-election. And I'll be honest, Bill, the income tax cuts I actually don't mind. I mean, Australian workers are massively overtaxed. But what I would have liked to have seen is tax cuts as part of a sort of broader tax reform. Tax reform,
yeah.
Unfortunately, we've just not seen that. So it's basically just cutting one area, but not trying to solve the overall tax system, which heavily burdens workers, but doesn't tax other things properly, which, as I've mentioned previously, resources, that sort of thing.
Yeah. So where does it sit on the terms of the good budget, bad budget scale? Because I know we've had people coming in here saying, it's not enough, and then it looks like the coalition's not going to offer, not going to support it. There's nothing at all. And it's like, well, if they give you a bigger cost of living relief, then people are going to complain because it's going to stoke inflation, putting more money in people's pockets. Is what people want and need completely different, what the economy needs versus what people want.
Are you ready to feast? Melbourne Food and Wine Festival is finally here. It's not too late to grab a ticket to one of the many special events in Melbourne and regional Victoria. And get yourself to Fed Square for Baker's Dozen, a celebration of our state's tastiest cakes and pastries. Entry is free. Melbourne Food and Wine Festival, on now to 30 March. Presented by La Trobe Financial and Melbourne Every Bit Different. Find out more at mfwf.com.au.
Different? Is it a hard mix to get right ahead of an election?
Well, look, yeah, to be fair, I don't actually think it was that bad because, I guess I'm coming from a cynic's point of view, right? So whenever I see these federal budgets, I always expect them to be worse than they are. That's just me being cynical, trusting politicians. So the fact that they've, it's a very small tax cut. There's sort of small additional spending here and there during an election year. I think it could have been a lot worse. But again, it sort of underlines this problem we've got in that there's no long-term thinking from the federal government in really any area. So we've got nothing. There's no plans to fix the energy crisis. It's just about handing out subsidies. there's no real plans to fix the housing crisis. They're just going to hand out money for Help to Buy, which is basically, their shared equity scheme without actually addressing the underlying problems. There's no real tax reform. It's just, giving a tiny tax cut to workers to try and alleviate some of the bracket creep that they're going to suffer, and they have been suffering.
So no guts, no real vision. It's just it's hope to try and see if the voters swallow it up a little tax cut and see if that buys a vote.
Mate, 100%. This is a budget with a 2-month time frame. So 2 months being when the election has to be held. And to be fair, the major ratings agency, Standard & Poor's, didn't raise any alarm from it. So they basically said that they're keeping their outlook on our credit rating stable at AAA, which is good. So they didn't raise any alarm. Australia, thankfully, has low debt compared to comparative countries. So we are, well below US, UK, Germany, etc. as a percentage of our GDP. We have relatively low debt. So Standard & Poor's seems pretty happy with it. The bigger issue is if Australia has a massive decline in commodity prices, or we have another sort of global financial crisis or some sort of new event, that's when we could get into trouble. But again, that's a problem for a future government. And this budget is purely about seeing through the next 2 months, getting re-elected, and then worrying about the consequences later.
Right. There's before I get into more of my questions, there's a question here from, I don't know whether you've had a look at any of this stuff or you do. Paul at Astley said, no one ever tackles Labor on the billions of dollars spent off the books, which never appears in budget figures. Labor continually lies and hides what they're actually spending. Any tax cuts will eventually be eaten up by bracket creep and income just goes backwards. The government of the day wins.
Yeah, well, that's a fair observation, because unfortunately our income taxes aren't indexed to inflation. So over time, bracket creep will always pull more money out of our pockets. And this tax cut is, and same with the stage 3 tax cuts, which were actually introduced by the former government, but moderated a little, changed a little bit. Those are effectively just a way to give back some temporary bracket creep. But over time, with inflation, et cetera, and as we have wage growth, which isn't necessarily real wage growth, our average tax rates do always rise. And they're even despite these tax cuts, average tax rates are projected to continue rising. And that's just unfortunate, the flawed way that the tax system's set up. It's set up to basically overtax workers, and unless there is broad-based tax reform, workers are going to just keep paying higher and higher taxes. And that's just the sad reality of it.
All right. What did you make of, will this have any impact on interest rates? Because we always focus on interest rate cuts for mortgage holders. Does it have any impact on what the Reserve Bank does?
Look, it's hard to say. I suppose it is mildly expansionary with the tax cuts, et cetera, but probably not enough to really move the needle. And the tax cuts won't come until mid-year anyway, so I think in the short term, I don't think it'll change too much. It's always hard to say, though. I mean, it could delay a rate cut by one meeting or something.
Okay.
It's hard to say. But yeah, honestly, I don't think it's going to move the needle that much. And in fact, the energy subsidies will do what the last energy subsidies did. It'll actually lower headline inflation, other things equal. So yeah, I don't think that much difference.
All right.
Inflation's coming down anyway.
You always have a pretty close look at the migration forecast as well when looking at budget papers. What does that tell you?
Yeah, so there wasn't much change there. So this budget downgraded this year's forecast for net overseas migration by 5,000, but also upgraded next year's by 5,000. So it's basically a wash. So the government projects that we're going to have 335,000 net overseas migration this current financial year, and 260,000 next year. Now that's obviously down a lot from the peak, which is about 550,000. But it's worth bearing in mind that 335,000 for this financial year is still the highest in Australia's history before the pandemic. So the highest year we had before the pandemic was 315,000 in 2008. So we've still got very high population growth, and the budget actually had population growth figures, forecast for the next 5 years. And what it showed is for Queensland. Queensland's population is projected to grow by 412,000 in the next 5 years. Now, that's obviously going to put a lot of pressure on the housing market. And and nationally we're projected to grow by 1.8 million people over the next 5 years. So this is, again, into a supply-constrained market where we're not building enough houses. And all it tells you is that we're going to just continue to have this same problem with not being able to supply enough housing to the growing population through immigration.
All right, and no gas mentioned in the budget papers, I don't think.
No, unfortunately not. Now, there are rumours that Peter Dutton's budget reply speech will, raise the prospect of some form of domestic gas reservation, which I think would be a good thing.
Well, I was going to say, what does he need to nail, Peter Dutton? Because Angus Taylor's been pretty lacklustre as the Shadow Treasurer in his responses and his performance the last couple of weeks. Sorry to cut you off. What does Peter Dutton need to nail in the response?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's going to be pretty hard. So during a cost of living crisis, people don't ever want to hear about austerity, which is basically cutbacks.
Yep.
And unfortunately, I think Peter Dutton shot himself in the foot in the last month or so. And you've seen in the polls, even before this, there was slippage in the polls back towards Labor by sort of going hard and cutting the public service, getting rid of work from home. All these sorts of things are basically cost of living, assaults on cost of living. And one thing he needs to steer clear of, he needs to steer clear of trying to go the austerity route. We need to cut back this, cut back that. Even if, you might think that's the right thing to do, the fact of the matter is during a cost of living crisis, voters won't buy it. But certainly from a policy perspective, I'd love to see him, go hard on gas reservation, because it's really a discussion we need to have. And then hopefully if he does that, Labor will respond and say, yes, we're going to copy that policy as well. And if that happens, we could actually get a pretty good outcome, because it's something which, as I've mentioned here previously, it's absurd that the East Coast exports nearly three-quarters of our gas, and we've created a domestic shortage and then end up paying high gas and electricity prices. That really needs to be fixed. Yeah.
What are your thoughts as well on Angus Taylor's performance as the Shadow Treasurer and his messaging? It seems to be an anchor on Peter Dutton and the coalition at the moment. I know there's speculation today, there's talks in the background, hey, look, get off his back, support him. His response, he's already said, no, we're not going to support the tax cuts, which talks to what you just mentioned, like the steer clear of the austerity. I think people, no matter what the size, will go, yep, we'll take the tax cut.
Oh, and to be fair, I mean, they should take the tax cut. We are massively overtaxed. Workers are massively overtaxed. Bracket creep is a pervasive problem that hits us every single year, so we should have some of that back. But I mean, that is just lunacy, if you ask me. So if you're going to say to every Australian worker, which basically three-quarters of Australians work, or three-quarters of voters, that we don't support tax cuts, well, that's just not going to play in your favour, is it?
That's already what he said on the ABC.
Well, I mean, that's just silly, and some segments of the business lobby or the budget purists who worry about debts and deficits and that sort of stuff, they might cheer you, but they are not the voting public.
Yeah,
and that is just absolute tin ear stuff, and you're just shooting yourself in the foot.
All right, we'll wait and hear what happens tomorrow night with the budget reply from Peter Dutton. I appreciate your time as always, mate. Thanks again.
Yeah, no worries, Bill. Anytime.
Leith Van Onsel and the Unconventional Economist. You're welcome to weigh in on anything you like there that Leith had to mention. 133 882 in